Hello, everyone. Welcome back to In.site2 and Sustainability Across Disciplines. It's a Faculty of Fine Arts and Faculty of Arts and Science collaboration. The event happening now, why are documentary films important to multidisciplinary sustainability research and practice? With Zachary Fleury, Warsame Isse, PK Langshaw, Julia, Catherine Lehman, Liz Miller, and Adriana Miranda. Just to help situate you, we are streaming to YouTube live from ForSpace. We are located here on unceded Indigenous lands. We're also running this event as a live stream Zoom meeting, so questions and comments, please add those to the chat. Those of you here in the space, if you have some comments or questions after, we'll bring a microphone over to you. Okay, it's now my pleasure to pass it over to Professor in Design and Computational Arts, fellow at the Loyola College for Diversity and Sustainability, but also a co-lead of In.site2 and the collaboration this week. PK Langshaw, over to you.
Thanks, Doug. So welcome, everyone. My role here is I had the absolute pleasure of working with Adriana Miranda. She was an international student doing her design major here at Concordia, and she comes from the Rio de Janeiro area. She was a brilliant student, and luckily enough, I've been to Brazil to work with her, but also very interesting in terms of spiritual ecology and environmentalism. If you care to look it up, her stepfather is Leonardo Boff, who is one of Brazil's leading philosophers. So it's such a very rich environment, and her mother also works with indigenous groups. So when Adriana finished her degree, she worked in Montreal for quite a while, and then she went back to Rio and started Meyu Films, documentary filmmaking, and she would be here actually, and she says hello to everyone. She misses Montreal, but she is deep, deep in the jungles. I'm not quite sure where, but I think it's north near Bahia. And so she doesn't have access to media. So with that, Birdie is going to play, this is Adriana just speaking about why she makes documentaries.
De ecoar e contribuir com mudanças. Mudanças que exprimem o que realmente acreditamos dentro de nós, que nos move, dia após dia. Eu tive a sorte de, desde cedo, poder acompanhar de perto a vivência da relação com a terra, com plantar e colher. E quando eu penso em todas as possibilidades que um país gigante como o Brasil poderia oferecer em relação à soberania alimentar e a uma vivência mais harmônica com a natureza, e no lugar disso o que temos visto é justamente o contrário. Nós estamos vivendo dentro de uma ditadura disfarçada, onde o nosso presidente de extrema-direita declarou guerra não só contra a cultura, mas contra a própria vida em sua essência. A crise do corona veio agravar ainda mais a situação, e enquanto milhares morrem, nosso presidente diz, e daí? Não tem nada que eu possa fazer. Por isso, Grão, nosso filme, representa a esperança. E eu gostaria de agradecer muitíssimo a todos que participaram, a equipe maravilhosa que está por trás, aos nossos apoiadores e, sobretudo, aqueles que acreditam, como a nossa personagem Miraci, que luta dia após dia na construção de um mundo melhor para todos.
So the way, just to tell you how we're going to do this, so you can sit back, we're going to watch, this is a film now that Adriana has done, and it is public on Vimeo. It is 15 minutes, but we're playing only 10 minutes. And then we're going to introduce Liz and her team to talk about their documentary film. What is really interesting is, for me, is the socio-cultural, environmental intensity and intention of these films, but also you'll see aerial views in one film, and then in Adriana's, everything is very, very close to the earth, the ground. So with that, this is called Seed.
aguda flor e infinito pardo. Mestiça e nômade, pólen que alimenta. Seu ventre sempre aguarda uma semente. A terra é como um berço. Seu embalo é o sopro do universo. As pessoas não têm essa preocupação com a semente crioula, né? Semente nativa. É mais fácil ir lá no mercado comprar, né? Mas, por exemplo, as sementes que a gente compra, ela produz bem o primeiro ano. O segundo ano já não produz mais. Já é uma planta misturada com gene de outras, a gente nem sabe de quê. É muito dependente de veneno, de agrotóxico. Já vem, já é todo preparado. Por exemplo, essa terra aqui é cheia de matéria orgânica. Se a gente joga veneno, vai matar o micro-organismo dela. Esse tanto veneno que é jogado, né, nessas grandes plantações, que também afeta nós, contamina a água, contamina o solo, contamina o ar. Chega um ponto da gente desanimar, falar, o que eu quero na terra se eu não posso mais produzir? Eu vou morar para a cidade, vou comprar lá um barraquinho. É uma forma que eles têm para tentar expulsar as famílias do campo e deixar a terra para eles. Esses grandes empresários não estão preocupados com a alimentação para a população, né, do seu país. Eles estão preocupados simplesmente em acumular grande capital, né? Porque aí a grande produção deles, eles vendem lá para outros países, para fora, para tratar dos animais. A coisa mais triste é a gente saber que tem gente passando fome, gente dentro desta simples sementinha, né, que a gente planta, que a gente cuida. Quanto de alimento ela vai gerar? Olha que tamanho, olha que coisa rica. Essa aqui eu consegui uns pedacinhos de rama dela numa comunidade quilombola. Essa variedade de feijão catador, eu trouxe lá da festa da semente. Lá tem vários agricultores, né, que trabalha igual a gente, né? Sem veneno, sem nada, sabe? E eles têm muito assim carinho também com as plantas, né? A gente faz assim, vai nos encontros, troca as sementes, traz a planta. Aí dessa eu já guardo para mim, né? Para mim plantar outro ano e para me levar para esses eventos também, para as festas de semente que a gente vai, né? Porque lá todos os agricultores e agricultoras levam suas sementes e lá faz toda aquela troca, né? Aquela cerimônia bonita, sabe? Sobre a semente. Tu vai criando aquela rede, né? Para não perder, né? Se a gente vai trocando, vai aumentando. Tudo está em relação com tudo. Nada está isolado, existindo solitário. Os seres todos do universo não estão simplesmente justapostos uns aos outros ou aí jogados como bolas de bilhar, se entrechocando. Estão ligados e religados por um fio condutor que faz que todos componham um cosmos complexo e majestoso. Plantando a semente, ali a gente está também plantando esperança. A cabeça pensa a partir de onde os pés pisam. Para compreender, é essencial conhecer o lugar social de quem olha. Que experiências tem, que desejos alimenta, como assume os dramas da vida e da morte. Que esperanças o animam.
This film is actually only 15 minutes long, so it's on Vimeo, and if you have trouble finding it, or she has some other films as well, just email me. Thanks. And now, my colleague, my collaborator, Liz Miller, and Zach, who's part of the team, who you will introduce, and welcome.
Okay. Thank you so much to those of you who are here today. It is such a privilege to be sharing this work in progress and to be in the company of such a talented and passionate filmmaker. It's a really beautiful film, and we're really honored to have been invited into this conversation. So thank you. And we love the prompt of why are documentary films important to multidisciplinary sustainable research? And it made us start thinking about what is a documentary film. And the film that you just saw is very different than the film work in progress that we're going to present. But we wanted to just begin by saying that our interpretation, or what we're using as a prompt for documentary film, is called open source documentary. And in this context, documentaries less than an auteur-driven documentary that might be talking heads or that might be interview-driven, instead is a collective process. And it's a process that invites partners and audiences into a set of conversations, exchanges, and that can sometimes result in things like social change. But that the process itself is as valuable as the product. And so we thought it was a really exciting opportunity to share with you something that is very much a work in progress. It's a fragment of what will become an installation, a 3-wall installation. And so we've compressed it into a 9-minute excerpt where you'll see 3 screens, but they're compressed in 1 frame. But you can maybe imagine 3 walls of experience. And for this project, Zachary, who's sitting here to my right, is the sound designer. And after we watch this clip, he's going to speak a bit about the sound design. And Yulia, who you will see in the box, the Zoom, who's so patiently being with us at a distance, at a Zoom distance, is the cinematographer and the editor. And she's going to talk about the potential of subverting the power of aerial cinematography and how we have been using aerial cinematography to do something quite different than its previous incarnations of surveillance and other such stuff. But I don't want to say too much because she's going to say quite a bit about that. And I just want to also just explain, this piece is a sort of tribute to the Hochelaga archipelago. Many of us don't recognize or don't remember or don't think about on a daily basis the fact that Montreal is one island of 300, that we are part of a northern river archipelago, the Hochelaga archipelago. And what we wanted to do by using aerial cinematography in coordination with some other cinematography was to create what we're thinking of as an archipelagic poetics, an archipelagic sensibility. And of course, we're not the only ones thinking about this. We're inspired by scholars like Edouard Glissant and other scholars of today who are trying to imagine how we can reposition our human superiority frameworks and think more as ecosystems or as archipelagos. And so we were trying to think about how the drone camera can help shift perceptions. But we're also really interested in interactivity. And so we're missing one partner in our presentation today, who's Warsame Isse, whose whole art practice, he's a creative technologist and an artist, and his whole art practice is thinking about interaction and interactivity. So we imagine this as an installation, but we're also in a very open position of trying to imagine what forms of interactivity we will invite in this installation, and that might be something that we can explore together in the Q&A. So the last thing I'll say about the archipelago is that we're inspired by this notion of prefiguration, which means that the process has to sort of mirror the future you imagine. So if we are using the archipelago as a sensibility, it's a sensibility that takes into account all the fact that there are many islands and that rather than, and waters and environments, and that we want to move away from this sort of individual island and into this notion of collectivity. And so for us, the archipelago is method, it's metaphor, and it's the place that we live in. So with that, maybe we can start that film. I'm going to just distract you while we're lining up the media. Today is a really interesting day in the life of the archipelago because the ice, we've had a lot of ice this year, and the ice is beginning to separate from the mainland. And Zach and I are really tortured to be here. We're really excited to be here, but we kind of wanted to be down at the shore, recording the sounds of what happens when the ice breaks from the mainland, because we've been really kind of following the archipelago like a city symphony, like each day trying to sort of see and witness the changes. And today's a big day because of all the sun. So that's just to honor the archipelago as we wait for the film. I'm really sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, and even in terms of the process of making the film and thinking through the archipelago, like days like today where we do see the ice changing and we can hear it. Like I biked on my way here near the canal, and we can really hear the ice like crackling under the water. And I think also the value of showing a work in progress of the film, of just showing 10 minutes of it, is also that it is a process. And like the longer it takes to work on this film, the longer that we get to know the archipelago, and the longer that we get into contact and into relation with the water. And that's all part of bringing richness into this project, and also bringing other people who are just naturally gravitating towards the process, like me, who joined midway, but also Sammy and everyone else who's part of it. Yeah.
We're just moving the film to a different computer.
Yeah, so we'll just keep talking. I actually think that you could just begin speaking about some of the considerations that you took into account. Well, actually, let me just think. I want to make them. Should we have Julia come on, or?
No, it's okay. We're just going to queue it up here. We've got it over on the other machine. We're just going to open it up and make sure I've got it all ready to go. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. Sorry, Liz, I interrupted you. Keep going.
No, it's fine. I'm going to, I think we're close. I'll prompt you for some of the questions that we still have unanswered in this process, so you can be thinking along. So sort of, we're doing this presentation backwards. But one of the things that we're thinking deeply about is in making a film that really privileges aerial cinematography, we're thinking deeply about when on the ground and why on the ground. And especially because we initiated this project thinking about like, what is a feminist sensibility of working with aerial cinematography? And so much of my orientation as a filmmaker is very much on the ground and grounded. And I think Julia and I together were really trying to imagine, is this, can aerial cinematography, how can it be a tool that can facilitate the kind of inquiry that we want to explore with place? And maybe you had something to say about thinking about sound.
Yeah, well, there's various, part of this film is also that these scenes are going to be changing every time that we watch the film. So in an installation context, these scenes would be always evolving. And so every time that you come and see the film, you would get a new reading of it. And with sound, that was also the case. And for this one specifically, that we're going to be showing today, we kind of brought our hearing back closer to the water, so we can hear the water a lot more. But I think something really interesting about drone cinematography is also what it excludes from what we're hearing. And when we are, near the water, we hear, of course, but going underwater, there's so much more that's happening there. And that's somewhere that we want to move forward to with the project also, is bringing the listener underwater and hearing all of the noise pollution that happens there, which is often, hidden from us. And yeah.
I mean, well stated. That was one of our principles, that we often think of landscapes as fixed. And so one of the things that we didn't want for this film was to feel like we had a fixed form, that it was like every time you'd watch it would be the same. So exactly as Zachary just said, One of the challenges that we haven't resolved, but that we really want to think through, is how can the user expect something different every time they approach the installation? And one of the ways we're thinking about that is that you would see the images, but the sound would transform beneath the images. So for example, one version could be simply the sounds of the place and Zach's sound design. Another version could integrate pieces of archival sound that sort of hint at some of the context that we're thinking with and through in the production. Another layer, music. We have it's coming forward. Yeah. Yeah, okay, so we've really preempted this conversation a bit, so I hope you enjoy the next 8 minutes of this. So that is progress. And if you can imagine, instead of those small screens, you would be in a room. But I'd love to invite Julia now to share some of her slides and some of her thoughts about her process of doing this filming. Julia.
Yes, hi. So I have some slides. I prepared a short presentation. I'm going to share my slides with you. So, oops, sorry. So, can you see this? Everything is good?
It looks great.
Okay, so first of all, my name is Julia Lehmann. I am a documentary filmmaker, and I would like to first of all thank you for inviting us, and for giving us the opportunity to show our work in progress, and in general to organize the symposium. It's been very inspiring. So I will briefly talk about the process and the concept we were thinking with, and we used, as you've seen, mainly aerial cinematography for this project, and we were thinking along the lines also of the question of how might aerial cinematography be used to evoke an archipelagic sensitivity. And as you, drones technology originates from the military and has been sold to us as a more humane warfare because of its ability of targeted killing, while disregarding many innocent lives lost. And we can see that drones are predominantly used for military purposes, resource extraction, surveillance, agriculture, and what all these applications have in common is this binary worldview, but also being in alignment with the anthropocentric concept. And at the same time, there's more and more political activists, artists using drones. And we have been thinking as a counter concept with the feminist concept of the Cyborg Manifesto from Donna Haraway. And as probably most of you know, a cyborg is a cybernetic organism, a hybrid of machine and organism. And in her theory, the cyborg symbolizes this utopian view on how technology could elevate human capacities, and in doing so, alleviate the oppressive Western dualistic worldview, for example, in terms of race and gender. And if we see drone technology through this lens, we can ask ourselves, like, what does drone technology enables us to see that would be otherwise invisible, and how can we use it to our advantage? And there are several concepts that we've been working with. I'm gonna focus on one just because of time, in interest of time. And defamiliarization comes from discard studies, which have been established by Max Libaron and Josh Lepowski. And at its most basic, defamiliarization aims to portray an issue in an unfamiliar way, to invoke a new understanding of a mechanism and the impact it has on the environment and the world at large. And of course, drone imagery, drone aerial cinematography lends itself well to this concept of defamiliarization, and to actualize this idea of how can we see a very familiar issue in a defamiliar way. And as you might have noticed, we have included all the 4 seasons into our project, and we're inspired, as Liz already mentioned, by the City Symphony. And we're trying, instead of a day in the life, we were aiming for a year in the life of an archipelago, and to have like a complete representation of all the seasons. And as you might have seen or noticed as well, is there's also the human element in it, and it's juxtaposed with the landscape and in a different scale. And the idea of the collective convening is also a notion of hope, and to symbolize the question, or where's our agency and where do we go from here? And we were very fortunate, as has been established before, to collaborate with Zachary Fleury on this project. And he has created this beautiful soundscape that we listen to, and he's going to talk more about his process and his approach. So thank you very much. I'm going to stop this.
Thank you, Julia, and thank you for being so patient, waiting for us to get to you.
Well, that's okay.
Thanks, Julia. Something that I wanted to add also on mediation, defamiliarization. I think with mediation and the way that drones have been used in like warfare technologies also takes away this human agency, and anyways, it's just another mediation tool that I think often creates this detachment. And I think by using it in this way of giving ourselves this broader view, by bringing us up to the sky, in this sense, it brings us a sense of attachment, of seeing this archipelago in this broader sense and seeing all of the different islets that comprise it and make up this bigger whole. For the sound, also, I think that there was this question of asking when is the human element brought in? When do we hear people? When do we hear other things as well, like birds and other non-human systems and beings that are attached to the archipelago and to the water? And what is their role? And when will we include them in the soundscape? One thing that I was very interested that we do want to continue working with sound in this project is using granular synthesis, which unfortunately we don't hear as much here, but we do want to include. And essentially what granular synthesis does and why it's relevant to use in this documentary is that it breaks down sound samples into super small fragments, or like granules that we call small as like 1 millisecond. And something that we found, and I wish Warsame was here too, because he would love to speak of this, is how even in those small little frames and those little pieces of sound, we still get so much information and so much emotion and knowledge through them. And with water, for example, well, I'll bring it to a case where it's easier to portray and see. In my methodology using granular synthesis, when I started using it, it was with poetry. So what I would do is that I would write poetry and record it, or have other people read their own poetry. And then in those 1 millisecond little granules or fragments of sound, we still get a sense of what is being said, even when we can't discern the words or the phrases. And so there is this, all of this being carried in those pieces of sound. And I think in the water, this can also be done, and this points to this idea of like these subjective readings that are found in the water themselves, and that it's not, when we come into the contact with water, it's not just an object, but it's a subject of study with its own particularities, its own sensitivities, its own subjectivities, and one thing that so that there's this knowledge that we want to portray in the water, and to speak of how it touches us all. Do you want me to? Yeah, okay. Something that I think we can draw a lot of parallels with, that I think is interesting thinking through that, is, or that I've been thinking through, is, say, in indigenous storytelling practices, how there is all of this wisdom and this knowledge that is carried through the story, carried through the words which are used in this story. But all of that knowledge is in itself in the land and is found in the land. And so these stories and these words are found within the land. And similar here with water, that's, there's so much knowledge to this water, and so much to know from it, so much to learn from it. And in terms of interdisciplinary studies and approaching this from multiple different mediums, multiple different ways of knowing, Julia and Liz through sight, me through sound, Warsame through touch, through all of these different mediums that fall between our senses, that we sort of take on the forms of the archipelago in terms of the way that we're studying this documentary. So we are all approaching this as these different islands of experience and of knowledge and of approaches, and then we are coming together and reflecting the subject of study, which is the archipelago or the river in this context. And I hope that that's something that comes through image, but also through sound and through practice and through process and method. And I think also studying in this form gives us like a more whole or full understanding of our subject of study, and also positions it in a way which the archipelago isn't passive, but it is active in this sense, and it calls upon all of our senses, and we are, senses and mediums, because we are, studying this through different mediums that we're well, Julia is a professional in this, anyways. Yeah, I lost my thought there, sorry. Do you want to hop on? Yeah.
I think that's more or less what we wanted to share with you, except for we wanted to be really transparent about how much of a work in progress this is, and kind of share with you some of the knots that we haven't figured out yet. For example, as I was saying before, this has taken us a year to come to where we are now, a year in the life. We're inspired, as Julia said, by the genre of the city symphony. I don't know how many of you are familiar with that genre, but it was a genre that came of age in the 1930s, where you'd have a live symphony playing to a day in the life of a city. And it's been iterated over time. And so, as Julia said, we wanted to even further elongate that notion of time. Just like weather and climate, like how are we thinking both with space and time? And as Zach so beautifully said, how are we also coming into relation with with this place through the process of making the film? So the City Symphony was always a live performative act. And so we are trying to really be open about the future of where this goes. So we're trying to think about audience engagement, interactivity. We're trying to think about how much context we bring into this. For example, we're working with voiceover before, trying to sort of explain some of, if you think of like the life history of the St. Lawrence River and some of the major ruptures in its life, like the seaway, like the building of the dams. We had a whole narration that we've scrapped because we felt like it was too didactic, but we're still really interested in like how would a newcomer, somebody who maybe doesn't know so much about the life history of the St. Lawrence River and this place, what might they need to know and how will we communicate pieces of that? And that's where we may have one version, that has a little bit more of like archival sounds. And finally, we're still, even though we say, it's a year in the life, we'll probably be filming for another couple months, because we really have wanted to film a sense of hope and collective convening. And you saw the Tour de l'Île, the little glimpse of when cyclists take over the city once a year. But there's other ways. We have other scenes from the Île de Laurier when the birds take over a nearby island to hatch, and all these ways that we come together in unexpected convenings. So we're still gathering those. We're always open for suggestions. 2 weekends ago, we went out with some people doing ice fishing on the St. Lawrence. So it's also just this pretext for us. Being outside and falling in love with our place, this place where we have the privilege of working and living. But yeah, so those are some of the areas that we're still in development of. And with that, we'd love to hear any impressions or ideas or thoughts that this evokes for you, the audience with us today.
So if anyone in the audience here has a question or comment, you can raise your hand and we'll get a microphone to you. And for all of those of you joining us online, feel free to type any comments, questions in the chat, and we will read those out loud. Are there any questions or comments in the space? Yes, we got our first one right here.
I always have questions. This is not actually a question, it's a response to your prompt about how to make this new and different and how you might be able to use the sound. I'm so fascinated by the aerial view, and to me that's a bird's eye view. And Liz, I think about birds. A lot of what our archipelago is habitat, right? A lot of our organisms, non-human, are use the aerial space in ways that we don't see, including 90% of our birds who migrate, so seasonally passing across the archipelago, using it, maybe landing, maybe not, maybe just passing through. What we see is the geese. There's sound there. What we don't tend to see is the thousands and thousands of tiny migratory birds who fly very high at night and just kind of go over. A lot of our insects are, fly. Our trees and our plants have seed dispersal, which is seasonal, right? All of that is seasonal. We're so blessed to have the seasons here. And thinking about how you separate out sound. I love that you have the gulls, but and one thing that you might think about doing is separating, having the water sound version, having the biodiversity sound version. I know Jim is here. Jim's a fish biologist. Fish sound like something underwater to each other. Anyways, I don't know who studies that. Actually, I do know who studies that. Karen Fisher studies that. So there are, thinking about how two-dimensional our general terrestrial vision is, and how three-dimensional the vision of many of our non-human fellow living beings on this earth are. You're really capturing that third dimension. It would be nice to, it would be a really interesting thing to incorporate, I think, not to add work.
Wow, thank you. That's amazing food for thought. Maybe the reason why we're here today. Thank you.
Yes, I see another hand.
Yeah, Zach has a response to that.
Yeah, I love everything that you said. I think something very interesting of this is also of building like this wholer understanding of the archipelago through all of our senses, and which is why we think interdisciplinary studies are important, but also in building this wholer understanding or context for the archipelago, we also have to take in the subjectivities of the other living, breathing beings, systems that are part of it as well. And so I agree that there is like definitely a need. I mean, yes, we hear the birds here, but there is so much more that is to be heard and so much more that lives here, and that has to be at the forefront of the story, I think, to paint a true image of what it is. Thanks, Rebecca.
Hi. I really enjoyed it. I thought that, as someone who, from the perspective of someone who doesn't really know what the archipelago, or you know what it is, archipelago. I really loved how, like, coming from that perspective, I think what's done really well in the film is like not only the sound, but showing people and showing like exactly what you're talking about, like showing affect of their nature, land, and the ways that people utilize it in different ways. Like, I think that that's what stood out to me the most from like my perspective as someone who's not super like involved in the studies that you're talking about. So I just wanted to say that. And I think that also, given the context, like what Julia is saying really helped too with like talking about drones, talking about duality. I think that context made it so much more interesting too. And then, yeah, exactly what we're talking about, like documentaries and like how everything comes together to teach you something. I don't know. I'm just speaking out loud, but I really enjoyed it, and I thought the sound really added to the experience. I thought it was great.
I love it when you speak out loud. Thank you.
Thanks, Liz.
Yeah, so getting to know both films, Adriana's and yours, which I'm seeing pretty well the first time as compared to the other one, which I know quite well. I actually love the abstraction. In Adriana's film, the woman, the main character, it's not just visual, you're looking at me anyway. I look at her hands and I think about how the earth would feel under bare feet. So it seems to me that the person narrating is essential to the extraordinary sensory sort of expansion, not just the film itself, but everything that I can feel amongst that, and even my own experiences of where I've traveled, where I've worked. It comes in through the feet, the hands, and so on. What I love about your film is I'm also a water person, and I travel almost every day in the summer when I can on my bicycle trike. And the wind changes, the currents and the cycles. It almost looks like clouds swirling, or it is every day it's different. And to be honest, when I see the literality of people in your shots, I'm not interested. So I just want to say that I was so enthralled with the aerial views. I didn't want you to come down to the ground. I thought I was flying like those birds that you showed, or the birds that were animated. And so that's just not a harsh criticism. It's just, for me, how I feel through a movie. Yeah. Anybody have comments?
Yes, we have another comment. I see one or two hands, and I also just wanted to share just a quick comment from Rochelle Smith online. Loved it, inspiring, so many feelings. So I share that from Rochelle, and we have a next comment right here.
Yeah, I really like this style of documentary. I feel like you don't always see it, but when you come across like in a museum or a gallery or something, I find they're so enthralling, especially with the multiple screens, and the good sound design is so important, and then just the expansive visuals too. I think I have a few like random things I would have liked to see like in a future or not, but I think Rebecca was talking about migration, and I know there's like, you can see like there's visualizations of birds migrating using satellite data, like something like that, and you could do some sort of really interesting sound, like what that would like sound like if it's like pings or wings or something. But and then yeah, like getting like a hydrophone and hearing what the river sounds like underwater with the ships and the rapids and the locks moving or something like that, I think would be really, really interesting to just like really immerse us even further. Yeah, some random comments, but.
Very much appreciated, especially from a fellow filmmaker who has also a lot of experience shooting aerial cinematography and going to amazing places. Thank you.
I think I see another hand here.
Hello, thank you so much for sharing that with us and for screening it. I'll just add my 2 cents. I really loved how the beginning just focused on the water, and we just sat with that for like a minute, 2 minutes. I felt like that was the perfect start, and then went into the connectivity with the train that was moving, and then we went into the air, and then we finally saw people later. And I'll just counter what you said. I really liked the people. Having the people kind of made it for me. It made me think about interconnectivity between place and people. So that hit extra hard for me, especially in the beginning when you just see the water, you think, is this all that it's going to be? And then it transforms into something different. So I like the way you incorporated all the elements. And I love the sound design as well. And what Julia said about defamiliarization, I think was really great context before seeing the piece. And the thing about, aerial footage and its history with military use and then using it in a different feminist application, I thought was also really good context. And I really enjoyed the sound design. And I'll just echo, if we can hear what's under the water, I think that will add another extra element to it. Thank you for sharing it with us.
Yeah, the hydrophone, that's also something that we've been very interested in and trying to get our hands on one to move in that direction. I've also been ambivalent of the inclusion of people, whether it's part of the story or not. So I agree with you both, and I'm also thinking through it. But one thing that I think is really useful of having people in the story is also, because what we're trying to do is also say the story of like the control of water and how like these canals that we're talking about and going through like every day on our bikes, they were used to control the water and the flow of water, and how these cities have been created and how this expansion has happened and what role the water played in that. But I think that from this point moving on, like there needs to be a rekindling with the water, and I think that sometimes including people in this story gives this glimpse of hope of bringing water back into our lives in this great hopeful way, which it hasn't been. I think it's crazy to live in Montreal. I haven't always been near the water, but I just moved to St. Henry about a year ago, and now seeing the water almost every day, I find it crazy to be there during summer and being like, oh my God, it's so hot outside, and I can't even go swim most of the times. And so I'm still ambivalent of the role of people, but I think it's a great point that you both brought of why people, and yeah.
Version 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah, version 1, 2, and 3.
Wonderful. I see, actually, I have a hand in the back row, but I just wanted to say that Rochelle Online agrees the underwater elements are really going to add something.
Thanks very much. I really enjoyed watching both the films, and I was talking to Liz about this archipelagic vision that the film is interested in performing and engaging in. And one thing that struck me when I was watching the film, because I've just finishing up proofing a book on port cities, and my introduction to the book, an edited collection, is like really focused on the history of Montreal as a port city that, and how that port facilitated colonialism. And I'm wondering, in the title of the film, are you using In the Wake with Christina Sharp's book in your mind? When I was watching the aerial views, for me, many of them, on the one hand, I found the images of the water, the birds, and the greenery that's growing around the edges of the archipelago, like really beautiful to observe. But again, it's the port infrastructure, the trains, the boats, the place, that for extraction. Like I think a lot about the port in Montreal as a normalized part of our settler culture, extractive economy. And so I'm just wondering, how are we defamiliarizing that in the film, and what are you thinking about that?
I mean, those are wonderful questions. I'm so glad you're here, Jill, because I know you're working on your book, and there is so much synergy always in our projects. In the Wake, is also in the mess of In the Waves. Certainly Christina Sharp's beautiful work and is in our subconscious in thinking about this, but really we were also thinking like moving through the water, and In the Wake being this very precarious place of messiness and messed upness. And in terms of, yes, part of this, let's say, part of our discussions, but we haven't resolved this, is whether any of these ghosts or pieces of the history kind of come through in fragments. But this is not this version. We have another version where we have like pieces of archive that sort of puncture the piece. But we're not sold on it yet. We're really still working through it. But one idea we have is like you'd see this 15-minute piece of like the water version, 15-minute, maybe Rebecca's version, the biodiversity version, the bird version, 15-minute piece of the ghosts, these sounds that sort of reveal these contested histories. For example, when we talk, so archipelago is just a collection of islands, and people forget that we're one of 300. We're this like metropolis, right? So we've stopped looking and thinking of all the other islands that inform our who we are here, and things like the seaway, which disturbed so many different species and so many different communities in building it, which meant that Montreal could be this big port. So what Jill is saying, one of the reasons we start with the currents is because the currents were so important to the history of the founding of Montreal, because people couldn't pass through the currents, so they had to walk into the city, and they had to get to the city, and this is why Montreal became a city at all, because of those currents. So we've been thinking so deeply about some of this larger context, and literally, as we were saying, we tried to do some voiceover stuff, and it was too dense, too thick. But we are thinking about ghosts and fragments and archives, and so we'll see if there can be something there. And this is what Sammy, the interactive artist, and Zach we're thinking through. And we don't feel like we have the sufficient archives that we want yet, because we want kind of multiple perspectives of the archives, the Seaway as a pivotal moment of progress, but also as a pivotal moment of destruction and disappearance of the cultures and species that were there before it. So that's a really long answer, Jill, to your question, but I love your question. And I think what we want is that whatever you would come into in this installation, you would get some version of these different and competing histories of this place, these contested histories that are in an ongoing state of being contested. So, want to say something, Zach? Maybe you have a more coherent way.
Yeah, well, Liz has sent me a bunch of archival audio that we wanted to include. It just didn't happen in this piece, but it is something that we would have wanted to include eventually. And I feel like these archival audio pieces would have given the context of these colonial histories, which shaped the way that the water is around us right now. And so there is like a lot of value in doing that. Going back to one of the comments that was said before, also this like ambivalence and like abstraction that there is in the documentary right now, I think leaves so much space for the viewer to include themselves in the story and find how they are related to the documentary. And so I think there is a need to balance this, this structure that would speak of these histories, and then also leaving place for the audience to feel invited and compelled to interact with this piece. Sammy, who isn't here, I wish he was to speak of this. I think he's the best person to speak of interaction, because that's what he does. But we do want to find, if there's any questions also of how to get the audience member to feel more engaged, is something that we're also looking for and hoping to work towards.
I don't know if Julia, did you want to say anything that we missed in this kind of?
I have a lot of things to say, but I feel like I'm not in the room, so it's a bit. I don't want to interrupt the flow of the. I am also not sure where I am in the room. Somewhere.
You are very central. So you should just say some things, because we see you centrally. You don't see us, but you're really present.
Okay. Whoa. Now I see myself. So. Yes, I was just thinking, I really love the comment that has been made by Jill about the colonial history. And I think as more as we get into water, we see the very strong how colonialism is connected to water, and obviously to trade and to power. And I think what Zach said before, we have to, I was surprised by the archival footage and how familiar the Queen's voice is to me, who has not a really history with the Queen, but we all know her voice, and how that could be something, this normalization of this anthropocentric concept of resource extraction through water and through other machinery, like industries. I think there could be, that's very important to include. I think we should definitely include it in the future. And I think what we haven't talked about is the idea that the archipelago also stands for the interrelation that we all have and the interdependence within our environment, as opposed to the mainland thinking, which is more hierarchical. And I think our aerial imagery shows this, and if we include also the birds and to show the different layers, what I've said by the first woman whose name I'm unfortunately forgot, but those different layers of insects and migrating birds and human and underwater, I think could also mirror well what has been shown in the first movie, that that trees are also interconnected. And if we submerge the camera and the sound underwater, it kind of mirrors what's under the water is above the water, and how everything is interconnected and interdependent from each other. I think that's something we will include in the next version.
Okay, we have one final comment here. I'll hand on the mic over to Rebecca.
Hi, I'm so sorry, but I have another kind of suggestion, maybe, which is, we read our territorial acknowledgement all the time, and we talk about how we're in Jajage, and this is a meeting place that our Indigenous peoples met in Montreal. Montreal, Jajage was a community, a meeting place, a trading place, etc. before Europeans sailed down the river and claimed it as their own here on the mountain. According to our Haudenosaunee creation stories, humans got to Earth through Sky Woman, who came from the sky, and was rescued by the animals who dove up, from the bottom of the water. And this is Turtle Island because the turtles made the land, and the otter, the sea otter, or the muskrat, or whichever version you get, came up from the bottom of the water and brought the islands. And that is really, if we're talking about the history of the area, that is the history of the area further back. I know that would be a much bigger take than just, adding a bird's eye perspective a little bit. But I think it might be an important component to recognize the Indigenous history of this area, to recognize the importance of the water of the islands in the cultural importance of that to the local Indigenous peoples, and recognize that this is unceded territory. And then the visions of the development, the humans, I love that the humans are there, both from the bird's eye perspective and from the Indigenous perspective, as this is the settled land. This is where we are now in this moment from that history. It's my 4 cents. I'm done, I promise.
I think in the end, it's like Adriana is in a very specific, there's a time zone that's very critical. She has to get, she has to ask permission to engage with a population. So her job is actually quite difficult. And from her, she also has to watch what she says in the government as well. So I see her documentaries built on risk factors and the respect for the humans who she's trying to uplift and who are trying to keep their way of life and have that respected. But she also, I think she has some Indigenous in her background from her father's side, but she still has belonged to a very privileged family. So that delicacy of going in, I think, is quite different from the delicacy of information that we don't necessarily see in yours. I think your team has to decide whether you want to stay in the abstract and ask us to understand colonialism by the train, by the tracks, by that mess of highway, or whether you want to tell us literally. I think because otherwise you have to put in so much, you don't have a film anymore. You don't have an abstract film, and or maybe you have a documentary that's a 5-part series, which I'm not sure that that's what you're really aiming for. So I think your delicate task for everyone, Liz and Priya, as directors of this, is to really specify sensory to literality to information to a sensorial experience. Does that make sense to you, of like these decisions that artists have to make over maybe factual information? Like, what is it that gets us to go beyond your film? And like, all I wanted to do was say, where is that, Liz? Where is that, Zach? And I think that's what makes this so special, is I want to go there. And I know some of the places. So, and we know what a mess Montreal East is, with all the shipyards, the scrapyards, the pollution. So what is it like? How do you bring in what people already know when they watch your film? And what kind of information, or do you want to send them out in flying? But the drone is spectacular. The views are amazing. I'm so blown away.
Well, I just want to really, really appreciate all of this feedback today. It's such a privilege to be, this is the best of the Concordia community. This sort of spirit of generosity, we're very humbled by your wisdom, thank you. We are in the process, and it's okay. We're in the wake of our own film, in the wake of the of the Anthropocene in the Hochelaga Archipelago, and just full appreciation for the Force Space for hosting spaces like this, places, encounters like this. We're really grateful, and I think we'll end there.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to Julia Online. Thank you. Thank you for all of you who came out. We're going to have just a slight transition, so don't go nowhere. Liz will ask you to stay where you're at, PKU as well. And then we have Rebecca, who's going to be joining you up at the table. And
Anna and Force Space, please.
Anna and Doug as well. So.
One still? Oh. And I would say, audience, please come up closer and join. Really, it's all what we're doing now is what have we learned? And what has the audience in terms of feedback? So if you have a minute and can join us, we'd be thrilled. Yeah. And yes, we'll start with, so my colleague, collaborator, Rebecca. It's been a wonderful, challenging collaboration to pull it all together. And for Space, amazing for us, like setting up gallery spaces, people online, in person, and so on. And also a shout out to my student assistant who really has pulled together the visuals and so on. So who wants to start with what have we learned?
I just want to provide a little bit of context. We have been in Force Space since Monday. This conference is a week-long series of events. So we do have events tomorrow in the 12th floor hall building and on Friday at Loyola, but this is our final day in the Force Space. It's a particularly special space close to my heart, close to many of our hearts. And so we wanted to have a little bit of a wrap up of this part of the conference. It's also the last part of the conference that we will be online for. So the last part that will be recorded, the last part that you'll be able to participate remotely in. From now on, you have to come in person. You're gonna come Thursday or Friday. So it is also the final day for our student exhibitions here, and our design students and our fine art students who've put on fantastic exhibitions here. So it is the closing of, part of the conference. So PK and I have been working on this.
This is my question, actually.
Yes, how long have we
I
been
mean, I
working
kind
on
of remember
this?
when we first met, we've been talking about this almost for a year or something, yeah. I wanted to maybe just rehearse or go back and see how you both got together to work, because Force Space had worked with In.site previously, and we've worked, Rebecca, with the conference,
Yep.
Maybe starting even into the pandemic. So merging them together, bringing them together, you were already talking before you met with us.
PK
So.
and I are both fellows of the Loyola Sustainability Research Centre and the College for Diversity and Sustainability. So we do work together, to be perfectly clear.
However, the complexity is I put together the In.site sustainability across Faculty of Fine Arts 2 years ago. That was In.site 1. And I had it in my mind, I wanted to do a second one, In.site 2. And I know from Rebecca and Jim Grant that every year they have sustainability across disciplines. And so it was just this kind of odd should we collaborate? And because I think it was because the time limitation on force space was very limited for that year.
That could be, yeah.
And then we said, well, let's do it together. But we have different ways, methodologies of how to approach things. I did it by invitation because I know very specific people who had research that was quite relevant and really wanted to show it. But Faculty of Arts and Science does it an open call, which is only due January 1st. So it's actually been a real rush to pull it all together. So you can ask.
Yes, for the Sustainability Across Disciplines conference, it is an annual conference, and it is very last minute pulling it together because we set the conference every year for March, after midterms, after break, before finals, right, in the second semester, so that students who have done work in the first semester or begun their studies, graduate studies in the fall, might have something to present in the winter. So it's we always do it in these 2 weeks. And also so that students who are doing work in the winter semester might have time to pull things together in time for March. So the deadline for submissions is end of January, and then we always have late submissions, and we try to fit everybody in because for me, I have been running the Sustainability Across Disciplines conference since I first started here in 2017. And the idea was always, for us, was always to bring together all of the voices in sustainability across the university to have these conversations across disciplines. So the idea to be very open, to involve as many people as wanted to be involved. To begin with, at the Research Centre, which is quite large, the Loyola Sustainability Research Centre and the Loyola College for Diversity and Sustainability, which are cross-disciplinary, but really to invite the students in, both, as part of their courses potentially, but to present their work, graduate students, undergraduate students, and to kind of keep up with each other in terms of faculty level research and graduate student research, so we can, build collaborations like this one.
Yeah, and I think actually for me, I've met incredible people, even though the audience is maybe smallish. It's I really have tapped into some really interesting research and from audience questions, and actually now I think now I have a basis for an interdisciplinary course based on symposiums and conferences, and that students can go out and, because I think we were talking about that, a lot of students just don't have the time with the amount of pressure on coursework and so on. So what if there was a course that really encouraged students to go out and look for conferences and other voices online, in person, using force space as a hub for a lot of different events, and actually let students design their own path in a course. So I'm thinking, I'm an educator, I'll always go back to the educational part of things. And I really want to come with you on a drone. I shouldn't say that into the microphone, but please.
You passed the mic to me. We're sharing insights of the force space and its place in sustainable encounters.
Your experience here today, or
yes,
anything to do with anything?
I feel like I want to pass the mic to Zach, as it's his first time, because for me this is the most meaningful space I have at the university in terms of biodiversity. Just it's always awakens something I hadn't thought of before, because it's engaging with people who aren't immersed in my own logics, and I really love and appreciate this community. But Zach, this is your first encounter with this conference.
Thank you, though, for the compliment.
Oh, okay.
Oh, no. Well, actually, I had a question for Zach.
Oh, good.
Do I,
Okay, yeah.
just because in the context of this, like one of the things ForSpace tries to do is create an environment, who's built essentially to create an environment for interdisciplinary moments, conversations, opportunities. But at the same time, that does often make it difficult to bring finished works, to present things in ways that are in like an articulated environment, or things in which very special care has been taken to the media because of the kind of loose improvisational nature of the space. And so specifically often with film works, even though we have large screens and speakers, et cetera, it's always a bit of a, will this film get what it needs? And so the idea is often to create a scenario around the film where the conversation can happen, where there could be questions can happen. So it's almost still a work in progress or something like that. And I just wanted to get maybe your thoughts coming into an environment like this. I don't think we've worked with you before to see what that was like.
Yeah, I think it's a great opportunity to show work. I feel like it also creates an environment that feels healthy and inviting, and that you want to come in here and present work. I think also, I'm speaking I'm still an undergraduate student, and I feel that there isn't a lot of scenarios where we're reaching across different disciplines and different undergraduate programs and see what other people are doing. And I think it's very valuable and very magic and nice to see that these same types of ideas and thinkings are being done across different disciplines in ways that reach you in your own discipline. And I think that that's what I took out of here. Yeah, does that answer your question? Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
I really like how you just said that. I feel like if we embrace that notion of work in progress, and if it's either a work in progress or it's just like, how do we come to stage the conversations we want to be having about the work? Because the work is one thing, but the dialogue is something very important. So yeah, I think you're onto the right emphasis. Like we could go to a gallery and we could get it perfect, but what we can get here is this kind of synergy. So
I think that's what we look for at ForSpace, and I'll just pass this back, and I'd like to hear. And it was just the idea of conversations themselves, like creating an environment, bringing in objects and projects that maybe have an interdisciplinary, it's a palette of interdisciplinary things, but how do you know if the next step has been reached? How do you know if new conversations, new projects, new collaborations have been forged? And at least from maybe the ForSpace's team perspective, a lot of that is based on conversations, tones of voice, things happening in spaces that have been set up for them. But maybe that's a good pass over to Anna to see what your take on this is.
Yeah, well, I remember when I first started my degree, and this is the end of my undergraduate degree now, and feeling like I wouldn't be able to accomplish much in my undergrad, and that my interests being very interdisciplinary with design and then with the environment and with urban planning, I felt like, oh dang, I gotta wait till my master's to be able to do anything that feels significant and that feels like it really bridges my interests. And so then over this past year especially, I've been able to find a lot of opportunities that the school has, either through the CUSRA grant or just through meeting particular professors that have a very interdisciplinary approach. And then the symposium and getting to work with PK and Rebecca on it, it's been very inspiring and fulfilling that, oh, this goal that I had and this thing that I didn't feel like could be accomplished was accomplished. And I feel very fortunate to have been able to have a role in it. And so this space that we're able to have these conversations that, when I think back to beginning of degree Anna, she'd be amazed. And yeah, and just the fact that these conversations are happening also on a public level and on a level that not only is within the university, but it bridges outside of the university very intently. And it's not trying to keep this education that we have here in our own circles. I feel like that's the benefit of interdisciplinary knowledge in general. That we're not trying to stay within our disciplines and oh yeah, the sciences know this and then the arts know this, but first off, we're sharing what we know and what we've learned between departments and between levels, but then also trying to expand that into the outside of university community. I feel like that's very valuable, and it's very special that these opportunities are continuously made through these symposiums and through the events at the fourth space, and also through like research assistant positions and different grants working with professors. Like, yeah, it's been a real privilege, and I'm very thankful to have been able to do it multiple times now throughout my degree.
Just a plug for Anna, who's been so wonderful to work with. I don't see all the pamphlets. Were they all gone? Yeah, because there's such a range. There's a whole booklet, there's 3 posters, there's the artist plaques with laser cut letters. And also at the back is Anna's work with recycled sawdust. You'll see the stool and then the paravent. And so, yeah, she just engages and she just jumps right in there.
If you want to see Anna talking about her work, the recording of her presentation and the presentations of the rest of the student artists and designers are on the Fourspace YouTube channel and also posted already on the conference website. So you can hear all of our student artists and designers talking about their work. And that's another really special thing about the Fourspace is that students can be recorded. Not only can you participate in a conference and put that on your CV, but you can talk about your work and have a record of that and refer, when you're going further or going past here, there is that trail that people can look you up and learn about what you do.
Well, I can show the posters a little more in depth now. They all got taken.
Oh, no.
So, well, I printed an extra one. It's in my locker for you. But yeah, the other ones got taken. But that's the nature of having paper available. I can walk through the posters a little bit. And so I worked with PK on the posters and then with Rebecca on the posters quite extensively throughout all of the past 3 months. Okay, there we go. And so what we wanted to do was have it be very based in nature, and PK especially wanted to have some water, some sky, some trees, but have it abstracted. And so here we have this union between the typography and the landscape. The photo is actually from the Lachine Canal, and I went kayaking near the rapids there. And so it also has a connection to Montreal. And then all of the typography follows the same color scheme as the photos. So we have this main poster, and then one for the student exhibition that showcases the work from the exhibition that's behind here. And then another poster that's also been on the main front screen that has the schedule of the full symposium. And then a last one that PK kind of inspired and led. Would you mind flipping it upwards? And so having it be interactive by having it folded in half landscape and then having it laser cutouts of the titles. And so then when it's up on a board or on a table, then you can look through the titles into the description. And so it engages the viewer with this interactivity because we don't often get to interact with posters. And so that was quite nice, but then it also adds a depth that we're trying to get at with this conference as well, the symposium, by bringing people in and not looking at things just at face value, but instead having a broader interaction and a broader participation. So with the poster, it was a really interesting endeavor to try to kind of entice that already before you're even in the space.
Yeah, if you're wondering where any of the waste is, it's in my office because I'll take it to the garderie and my grandson, and we will do letter faces with. So there is absolutely no waste, which is actually really critical from a design point of view. I mean, you can have industrial waste and paper waste and so on, but the designer, it's like what we need to do, even though this looks small, the amount of publications and paper waste is extraordinary. So every small detail.
And I was reading in a book recently about sustainable, well, like responsible objects and the history of design, and how when you have waste as a byproduct of a design project, then that's a form of bad design, like not designing for the full life cycle of your object and just deciding to either have a lot of waste discarded in the process of your production, or then with your final object, having that destined for a waste pathway, so where it can't either be disassembled or it's, you know, harmful and toxic materials, or if it's just a piece of garbage. Like, that isn't responsible design, and that's not sustainable design. And so even throughout, you know, small actions like a poster or like some of the objects in the exhibition that is behind us here now, a lot of them have to deal with repurposing and regenerating materials. And so we have Lucy Gill's work in the window there that is fruit leather. And my work regenerates sawdust that is from the Concordia wood shop that I took as I was working. And so I worked in solid wood in the wood shop, but then also took bags of sawdust away with me. Then we have work with cyanotypes. And so that's a natural way of capturing an image instead of using like printer ink. And there are so many different examples of how waste can be regenerated into an object. And all it takes is just a little bit extra thought. And then you get to have a much more responsible object that also, it feels better than making something and then knowing that it's just going to go to a landfill without any sort of care and intention. And it really is just a method of care and improving the care that we have for our materials and for the things that we work so hard to generate in the first place. Like, why not build on that even further?
Does the audience want to say anything at all? Yes, please. I just wanted to say.
Here, let me just pass you the mic.
I just want to say thank you for doing this. I got a lot out of it. I've never been to this before, and I'm in my last year, so I'm glad I noticed those beautiful posters, which I actually loved and noticed at the back, like before. I just want to say thanks, and my discipline is communications and creative writing. Yeah. Good program, yeah. Yeah, thank you guys.
I think we have gone a little bit over, and we maybe need to wrap up so that the Force Space crew can get out of here and I can wash the dishes. Speaking of limiting waste. Yes, so we will be back, but not here in the Force Space. If you'd like to join the conference, you can check the website. You can check the schedule that's up there. There are 3 workshops tomorrow, one on life cycle assessment in the morning, and then something on trauma and anxiety and climate, and then something in urban studies on the 12th floor of the hall building. You can check it all out. And Friday we have a full day in person on the in the RF Conference Center at Loyola. Workshops, panels, student work, poster session, the whole 9 yards. But this is our last day at Force Space, so I especially wanted to extend a huge thank you to the fantastic crew here, unbelievably professional and patient. So Birdie and Jax, you're here, and Isa and Doug, of course, you have been fantastic through the planning phase of this, through all the last minute changes and the, oh my goodness, wait, we're missing X, Y, Z, and being here first thing in the morning and being here late in the afternoon, and months and months of planning. We really are so blessed and grateful to have you and to have this space, and just it's hard to express. Hard to express.
We need an applause for the 2
Exactly. Yes. Rebecca, PK.
Who required so much patience.
Thank you.
Thanks, Liz. Yes, which Yes, PK, it's really been amazing. It goes on, yes. I do need to thank our sponsors. We've had support from all kinds of units here at Concordia, Department of Design and Computation Arts, the Loyola College for Diversity and Sustainability, and the Loyola Sustainability Research Centre. Fantastic for space, but also SOFA, Sustainable Fine Arts and Studio Arts, the Office of the VP Research, Innovation and Impact. They just changed their name. Get that right? That's through an RE grant that we got. The Office of Sustainability and Career Advising and Professional Services, who supported the careers panel on Monday and organized that. That was fantastic. If you get a chance, check out the recording of that. And the School of Community and Public Affairs, Science College, Faculty of Fine Arts, Communication Studies, Poli-Sci, and Geography, Planning, and Environment, who are every year supporters of this work and of this conference. We're so grateful. Again, for the space and for the support of all of you coming on Zoom and in person. Today, we've had over 300 people come in and out of Zoom and of the space over the past few days, which has been amazing. So we do hope that you'll come tomorrow in person, Friday in person. Check out the recordings on the YouTube channel or on the conference website. They are posted. And with that, I guess, PK, I'll hand it to you.
I just want to thank that brownie over there. That just made me really hyper, but was delicious.
A shout out to the brownies. That's
Shout
right.
out to the brownies, to catering from the Hive, yay Hive, to Anna Noel for organizing all of this and for the beautiful posters. And to the volunteers, I had some student volunteers, Sandrine Manier Jeffrey, who's been here, and Neith Pitch, who was here this morning and yesterday, who provided some necessary coup de main. Sandrine's work is behind here, and she'll be exhibiting also on Friday at Loyola.
Yes, we echo that, Rebecca, and all of you, PK and Anna, for organizing this, everyone who's shown up, everyone in the audience for your contributions. Thank you for coming and activating all of these wonderful things in ForSpace, and we use that word wholeheartedly, activating. So we're going to be closing up the Zoom and the live stream and shutting down here at ForSpace for the day, but just a reminder that this is already available on our YouTube channel if you'd like to revisit or share it. So thank you again. Thank you to Loyola Sustainability Conference 2025. And yes, it continues. So everyone, head on over to the Hall building tomorrow and then Loyola on Friday. The adventure continues. With that, thank you and have a great rest of your day, everyone.